What had happened was, when KLM hit us, he severed his landing gear and exploded and hit 1,500 feet down the runway. His sight was closer to the tower than ours was. The tower called both of us and couldn't get any return communication. And about the same time, a airplane in the holding pattern right above the airport called the tower and said that he saw fire and wreckage on his runway. The fire trucks and ambulances come out and they get to KLM first. So this is why no one came out to our site. About that time, the center fuel tank of the airplane, which is located right under the wing as it joins the fuselage down in that area, the center fuel tank exploded and shot a flame probably 200 or 300 feet up into the air.
It strikes me as very ironic that if there was fire equipment there trying to put out the fire at KLM, if only they'd known there were potential survivors at our plane, that if they'd been able to get there, it might have helped.
The final toll is horrific. Of the 380 passengers on the Pan Am flight, only 54 survived their injuries. Every one of the 248 people on the KLM flight perish in the accident.
Shortly after the accident, it was much too emotional to talk about it. And to Suzanne and I, it didn't feel respectful of the people who had lost their lives. We wanted not to gloat we were still alive, you know.
What sense can be made of such devastation? Is there anything to be learned from the kind of impossible tragedy represented by Tenerife? Root causes for the catastrophe at Tenerife are manifold. The University of Southern California School of Engineering is home to an internationally famous aviation safety research and training program. Dr. Najmuddin Mashkati focuses on human error factors.
When you look at the contributing factors of Tenerife, which we were able to identify like 9 or 10 human factors, related contributing factors. At the end of the day, in its core, is a human factors problem.
No, I know
the
that.
culture inside the KLM cockpit would prove to be the most closely analyzed set of human errors attributed to the crash.
One of the biggest problems that was raised in the case of KLM at the Tenerife was that Captain Van Zanten, because of his personality, he was like a chief pilot, the poster boy pilot for the KLM, and that it was very hard to disagree with him. Cultural factors can play a tremendous role within the cockpit, between the pilot and co-pilot, and between the cockpit and air traffic controller, their interaction. As you see that you are really at the mercy of cultural factors.
They say that they're off, they're Pan-American. Yeah, well.
And as it turned out, it was actually the flight engineer, this is the third in command on the flight deck, who actually questioned whether the Pan American airplane was off the runway. He was the only one who did. And the captain responded that yes, he was, emphatically, that he was off the runway.
While the consequences of human dynamics at Tenerife will long be debated, other failures are more cut and dry. One critical but little discussed root cause has been attributed to a common technical glitch in radio communications.
Okay, stand by for takeoff. I will call you.
I responded by keying the mic and saying, "We are still on the runway."
Roger Alpha 1736, report when runway clear.
Tragically, Robert Bragg's urgent message that his 747 is still on the runway and in the direct path of the KLM 747 is never clearly received. He goes unheard because of a radio frequency phenomenon known as the heterodyne effect. Patrick Smith is a commercial airline pilot and author.
Most of the time, pilots communicate via a two-way VHF radio. And the way that works is a crew member or an air traffic controller picks up a microphone or using the headset and the hand switch on the yoke, clicks the mic, makes the transmission, releases the mic, and waits for an acknowledgement or, in pilot speak, a readback.
3 Golf Charlie's ready at Foxtrot 25 left. 3 Golf Charlie, runway 25 left, position hold.
Position hold 25 left, 3 Golf Charlie.
The trouble arises when 2 or more transmissions are made at the same time. They effectively cancel each other out, and the result is a prolonged squeal or just a hail of static. What happened to Tenerife is that 2 very critical transmissions that effectively could have prevented the accident were made at the same instant, were blocked out, and nobody caught it. There are units that can be put into airline transport radios that won't allow heterodynes to occur. And for the most part, they haven't been installed. And that's not to say that there's a crisis at hand where there are, airplanes waiting to crash into each other all the time. It's been 30 years and it hasn't happened. And with 40,000 or so airplanes taking off, commercial airplanes taking off around the world every day, the record speaks for itself. That said, it's an easy fix. Why not do it?
The catastrophe that happened at Tenerife has a technical name: incursion. The Federal Aviation Administration defines a runway incursion as a collision or a near miss involving 2 planes either trying to land or take off. The Tenerife incursion might be the worst in history, but it will not be the last.
From the last report I heard, there's still something like 300 runway incursions that occur every year throughout the world. In my case, I had never had a runway incursion until the Tenerife accident.
But one was enough, and another will be one too many. In the history of flight, mid-air near collisions are rare. However, near misses between planes where at least one of them is on the ground has become an almost daily occurrence.
There was another accident 6 years after the Tenerife disaster at Madrid involving a ground collision between a DC-9 and a Boeing 727. There was not a major ground collision after that until the accident at Linate Airport serving Milan in October of 2001. A Cessna Citation business-type jet was cleared to taxi to the end of the runway, and in doing so, it actually taxied the opposite direction and crossed the runway in which an MD-87 jet was taking off.
The runway incursion at Linate bears a strong resemblance to Tenerife. Both airports are notorious for fog, and neither at the time had operating ground radar. Runway incursions are a focus of research and development for Ratan Katwa at the Honeywell aviation firm. From the cockpit of an incoming plane at Los Angeles International Airport, he demonstrates just what pilots are up against navigating routine air traffic control signals on any given flight. As we near the runway, 2 potentially dangerous situations occur. First, our call sign was very similar to the call sign for another plane.
Did you hear there was a 3 Charlie Charlie? Yeah, on the frequency. Yeah, it just gave me the idea.
Our call sign is 3 Golf Charlie. What we heard on the radio on the same frequency was a very, very similar call sign, 3 Charlie Charlie. This problem or this issue of similar call signs has in fact been a component in previous runway incursions.
Next, something which could easily compound confusion about our call sign: a last-minute change to our runway.
Yeah, 3 Golf Charlie, change to runway 25 right, you're clear to land, 12507. Yeah, 3 Golf Charlie, runway 25 right, clear to land.
The last moment on final approach, the tower controller asked us to in fact sidestep to land on the other parallel runway. And this, of course, can set up an environment where the workload is high, stress can be high, and in other words, it can certainly lead to a situation where a runway incursion could potentially be caused.
Our confusing landing sequence at LAX illustrates why many believe high-tech map displays and situational advisory systems should be standard issue on commercial aircraft. But others feel technology isn't a silver bullet solution.
A TV screen style monitor shows a graphical depiction of where your airplane is relative to other airplanes on the ground and in flight. Something like that, had it been there at Tenerife, may have prevented the accident from happening.
Skylane 6530, Mike, at 25 right for a straight out departure.
Sometime